Are they really buying conference tickets? Are they really kind of engaging with this content in the way that we want? But like that is like a different story. I'm not sure that crypto media has totally perfected, how to marry these concepts together.
Welcome to Beyond the Beat, a podcast by Chain Story, the agency to elevate your status in crypto. I'm your host, Pedro, and every week we'll be talking to the people in crypto media. We'll be telling their stories, their failures, their lessons, and whatever tips or tricks they've got up their sleeves.
Welcome in, everybody, to another episode of Beyond the Beat. Super excited to talk to actually one of my favorite writers in the crypto space, David Canellis. I hope I got your surname right.
Yeah, no, that's right. Yeah. Great to connect, Pedro. Cool for having me on. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, man. I actually thought that I'd start this one out a little differently. And I want to ask what you want to talk about, or what's been like top of mind lately that you've been thinking about lately.
Yeah. That's a good question. Like when you asked to have me on, like, you go through this psychedelic experience of like, what do I think about journalism and what am I trying to get out of it? And like, so yeah, I've spent the last couple of days going through all of those things. The biggest thing that I guess like kept bubbling up is like, how you approach journalism in crypto like really depends on what you are trying to do, like, and that has changed I think a lot in the past kind of 5 or 6 years, where the main modus operandi of crypto media was to grab as much traffic as possible, so you're trying to like appeal to the broadest audience at times. And over time, I've seen that shift, and now obviously at Blockworks, we're kind of going for a newsletter first strategy in how we approach our audience. But at the same time, like, for a lot of what, I was doing in my past outlets, like at Protos and at the Next Web before that, was also trying to get really viral stories. And and there is a real difference between, writing content for the 30,000 degens that are in crypto, and then writing content for like the bricklayer who likes Dogecoin. And like, so it's, I feel like marrying all of these concepts is like where crypto media is right now, and like is trying to chart where to go. But what I hope is that, the art of the viral story isn't lost in the transition to targeting the people who are here and only here, if that makes sense.
Is virality, this is something I think about sometimes, like, is virality sustainable though? Because like viral stories, and they're sometimes so random, like you have no idea sometimes what's going to go mental on the internet, and sometimes it's like the story that you never expected, and sometimes it's the story that you really wanted, but that's usually or very rarely the case. So yeah, how do you navigate like the constant quest for for publishing or finding those viral stories?
Yeah. It's so disheartening sometimes. Like, I don't know. I've been in crypto for I think maybe 8 years. I was trying to figure it out, and like for the first year, I was like a crypto trader, like a crypto day trader, and then for the other 7 years, I've been really obsessed with traffic. Like, like I get very motivated by number go up, like whether that's clicks or returning readers or time on page or whatever. Like that's really what motivates me. So that can obviously lead you down the road of, well, I'm going to find a viral story and it's going to be great for 48 hours and I'm going to feel on top of the world. And then it's all going to go away and everyone's going to forget that it even happened.
And that you even wrote it, and that you still write, and that you're still a journalist.
That's right. So it's like, managing expectations is a lot of that. I feel like sometimes journalists can, like, I don't want to rub people the wrong way, but can kind of like overestimate the importance of the work that we do a lot of the times. Like, so like, if your goal is to communicate with the most amount of people and change their mind about something or entertain them or give them some nugget of information that they didn't already have, then chasing viral stories is a great way to do that, because you know that you have impacted 100,000 people's day with this random nonsense, or it could be, legitimate information too. In terms of like how sustainable it is, I mean, what I would say is that when you do hit a viral story that really kind of breaks through to the mainstream, uh, it's a great indicator of where that mainstream is at.
Mm.
And then that can inform your reporting moving forward. So, like, I mean, going back to 2021, when I was at Protos, we had a lot of success with quote unquote silly stories. Like we would do like, is unvaccinated sperm the next Bitcoin? And take it.
I remember seeing that and being like, is this an actual story?
But if you take that topic seriously and treat it as it's a real justification of your time, then you can inform people in that
Mm.
setting, but still grab a lot of eyeballs. And then that really hit. And then the thing after that was Mr. Docs, the crypto trading hamster, and then that really broke through too. That told us where normies are at. And it was, crypto trading hamsters and unvaccinated sperm. So you can then take that and then map your future angles to that and hopefully get more success with framing and distro through those kind of viral stories. So I'd say like it all kind of feeds into each other is kind of my philosophy on it.
Would you say that the unvaccinated sperm is the next Bitcoin, the silliest story that you ever wrote or published? Because
Um,
if it's not, I'm intrigued by what actually beats it.
I mean, I have done a lot of serious stories too. I just want to
Yeah,
preface that too.
disclaimer, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and it is all kind of like, I would probably, I'll say probably, but it's like it's also like you can take it seriously and kind of unpack why people are talking about that and kind of find some truth to it. Like a lot of people, like I like the idea of reclaiming clickbait as a genre of news article because as long as it's informative or educational, then I think it's really worthwhile. Some of my favorite feedback that I get are like, oh, really clickbait title, but great article. And like that is like kind of that's like the goal I think in general for online media if you're not operating on a long form basis. That's
So,
kind of where I look at it.
why do you think then that media outlets or journalists in general like fade that idea? I mean, because there is like a pushback against the clickbaity title, and for obvious reasons. But why do you think? Because this is actually the first time, or you're the first person that has actually like pitched this idea to me that you want to sort of lean into or bring back the clickbaity title that also has the content to back it up.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's hard. I mean, ask me on a different day and I'll feel differently. Like, it's just I might be in a particular
Should
mood.
we re-record this
Uh,
tomorrow?
yeah, look, one person I can shout out, like, Billy Brambrow from Forbes, who does their crypto content. Like, his headlines are art, and if you go back through his archives, like, it's so special what he does, and I think he finds a lot of success with that too. So it's like you can have a real like highbrow headline and angle, and maybe 500 people will read it. How does that stack up against 50,000 people reading something and they might have been like lured in to grab that article or read it, but they end it with, well, I was actually informed at the end of the day. And those
Hmm.
people clicking on that headline might not have been looking to be informed in the first place. They just want their biases confirmed or something like that. But they come out of it thinking, well, that was actually a worthwhile use of my time. And I think that there is a certain power to that. Like over time, if you turn that into a skill, your whatever brand you're writing for will benefit from that in the long run. Like and then it kind of goes into the conversation. Well, how worthwhile are all those people coming in if we don't know who they are? Like, are they really buying conference tickets? Are they really kind of engaging with this content in the way that we want? But like that is like a different story. I'm not sure that crypto media has totally perfected how to marry these concepts together. I mean, we're doing a lot of Blockworks with the newsletter strategy, and it feels like that is the right way to go in the current meta, I would say.
Well, that's an interesting point because I've got like a side gig that's like a newsletter business, and so I've got like some newsletters running for some clients, and I like constantly beat the drum about the idea of like owning your audience, and so it's not just like the one page that they jump on and then they jump off, but like you want to capture some sort of information, ideally the email of that person that eventually leads to more trust. You can understand more what they want to read than if you want to sell them, for example, conference tickets and things like that. And I've always been shocked by like crypto media or even just like crypto content creators that don't understand the idea. Like they understand, I suppose, and they're constantly beating the idea of like own your money, own your keys, that sort of stuff. But then they completely overlook the idea of like own your audience, and they just like pass it over, and it's all either on social media or just like your typical news site where you just go on, read an article, and then jump to the next one, the next tab, and onwards.
I mean, it's difficult. Building an audience and owning it is really, really hard. It is, I think, much more difficult than just trying to game the Google algorithm to get priority. So, I mean, there are a lot of really talented people in crypto media, but I feel like it is quite daunting to say, well, now you're going to start from 0 subscribers. You're going to try and get to X amount of subscribers, and you're going to try and hook them in every day to open your article. Um, it takes I mean, what I've learned is that it takes a very different approach to writing, to lead generation, and to general framing. That's very different than writing like the educational clickbait that I was talking about before. So I mean, it is also like a really work in progress. I'm not sure like we have a lot of examples of newsletters that have really struck in terms of like proper mass appeal. I really like what Milk Road does, but at the same time, like that is not deep dives into, like journalistic deep dives into different topics like what we're doing with the Empire newsletter or the other Blockworks newsletters at the moment. Um, so it's like, yeah, again, it like comes down to what you are trying to get out of it. When you're building a newsletter, I would warn anyone that it is like a decade-long process. I mean, look at like Matt Levine and money stuff. I mean, that has the biggest brand recognition I feel in kind of finance media when it comes to newsletters, and it's only because he has done it for so long that you want to read it almost. So it's like you can't go, well, we're going to launch a newsletter brand or a newsletter and have a rotating cast of writers on it and kind of build the audience that way. I feel like it is a very long haul thing, which when crypto has only been around for so long, that is also like an unimaginable task to kind of go, well, we're going to invest in this audience over the next 10 years and then really see where we're at. But that's where
Well,
I think it should go.
it's nearly like paradoxical as well because you've got like the short term sort of number go up casino speculative side of things in crypto, and then you've got this sort of idea that it does require like a longer time horizon because both you're super early and it's such a nascent industry that you're just thinking to yourself, all right, this is going to be a decades long process. But like you say, like to actually commit to one specific channel, especially in like a super like the media is being constantly disrupted, and even more so now, and even more so like in crypto where there is different ways to approach your audience, that yeah, it's got to be a bold move, and like you've got to have some like deep conviction to be like, all right, this is the route I'm going to go down.
Yeah, I mean, and again, like it really does come down to like what you're working with. Like, I mean, there is on the opposite end of what I'm talking about is that yeah, you could have a very protocol specific newsletter that is dedicated to like Toncoin or something like that. It's arguable whether Toncoin is going to be around in 5, 10 years. Maybe it will, but you are kind of subscribing to the idea that you are trying to capture the bulk of the energy when it's hot, and then seeing where you're at once the peak kind of happens. And then you're really looking at different outcomes for different energies. I guess you could say. But in terms of like an actual like a media brand trying to own its own audience, I think it's a long time of you know making the audience clear on how you unpack narratives and how you approach them, and then that filter is what the audience will end up gravitating to, rather than even sometimes the information within it, if that makes sense. You're really kind of branding the tone, and then hoping that that is enough to kind of create word of mouth to kind of spread the newsletter that way. Because the industry is so cyclical that if you're targeting professionals in the crypto space, for example, maybe in 3 years you're going to have a whole new set of employees
Yeah.
at that firm, but you still want whoever is left at that firm to say, well, you need to read this newsletter because that will inform you of the right way to look at stuff, is kind of the thing.
I wanna veer off a little bit, or I guess take a step back and understand where you came from and how you became editor of Blockworks. And I want to touch on your writing soon, because like I said at the beginning, I'm a huge fan. And I was chatting to some people that I was interviewing you, and they all were like, "Oh, he's got some of the best writing that I like." I don't want to make you blush, but
Yeah.
um, how did you become like how did you get to becoming editor at Blockworks? Because you said that you worked at Protos before. What led you up to like diving into the crypto media space?
Yeah, so I mean, yeah, I got into crypto in like I think it was like early or mid 2017. Just as a trader, like I have been permanently online since I was a kid. Like my first earliest memories are like using DOS, at like 3 years old, that kind of stuff. Into like MISC when I was like a teenager. So like I've kind of like permanently been online, and I was doing an arts degree. I was bouncing between arts and computer science. Eventually, like I became like a computer science dropout and finished my arts degree and ended up trading crypto. So like,
As
I
one
would,
does.
yeah, exactly. Like I would kind of wake up in the morning and look at Twitter and pull four different tickers that everyone was talking about that day, and then pull up four Binance charts, and then swing trade between the coins, kind of all day long. And then it kind of got to a point where, just I was hanging out in Telegram channels, and I stumbled upon someone who could, get me eight, it was in pence. So it was like 8 pence per word for crypto media articles. And then I was like, hey, I do have an arts degree and I can write, so maybe I'll do that. And then what really hooked me was, I had written as a quick story based on like a press release from like a smart contract auditor that had found a flaw in EOS. And then so I wrote an article about that. And then the next day, Dan Larimer, who was the guy behind EOS, he had made a YouTube video addressing the FUD. And then I
Ah,
was
no
like,
way.
yeah, I was like,
From
okay,
zero
so
to 100.
yeah, I was like, wow, you can actually reach out and touch this industry in such a way. Like, I had been like a gamer, like I was like a social media manager for an esports team for a while in Australia when I was at uni, and you didn't get the same kind of immediate impact as you did writing crypto articles. So from that point on, I was really hooked. And then I eventually, like, I applied for a job on Twitter to work for a Dutch media and events company called the Next Web, and they were launching a crypto vertical called Hard Fork. So they brought me over from Australia to kind of work full time covering crypto from there. Um, and so there I was kind of like, I was all in on crypto, and it was like 2018 where, it was so explosive, and it was like the aftermath of the ICO era. So there was a lot of stuff happening in terms of like hacks and cybersecurity, and like, the market was so volatile that it, it eventually, like, I stopped being involved in crypto markets and just kind of covered it from a day-to-day perspective, because I was making more money writing about it than I was ever trading.
Which is funny because most people don't make any money from writing or trading.
I'm very privileged that that I've now made a living writing at all on the internet, let alone just about crypto for such a cyclical industry. And I mean, from the next web, like that was kind of wounding down. They ended up getting acquired by the Financial Times and really leaning into their tech events. And there wasn't so much of a focus on crypto anymore. So then I was kind of pulled across to launch Protos by the same guy that hooked me up with those 8 pence per word jobs way back in the day. He was launching something at Protos. And so, from there, it was really like, you know, crypto media was heating up. This was in 2020, 2021. So I would say at that point, the crypto media was at its largest in terms of like head count. This was long before all the layoffs had happened at all the major pubs. And so, we had 3 or 4 people at Proto. So it was, in terms of like what I try and do when it comes to reporting, it's like I really focus on what people aren't doing, and then kind of inhabiting that space. And in 2020 and 2021, it was like licensed to be really snarky and really like adversarial in a way that the other publications weren't. It wasn't like we woke up one day and like chose violence against the industry. It's just nobody else really was. So it's like that felt an appropriate use of our time because at least we could, we could kind of make that our brand in a way.
That continues to be the brand for Protos, doesn't it? Like that sort of crypto skeptical, adversarial take on things.
I mean, I can't claim, total responsibility for or total credit for all that because, like, Kaz and BT and everyone else that's there have really kind of run with that and made that their own. I mean, and again, it's like, I think a lot of that comes from like TNW. Like TNW is like the next web where I was before Protest. Like that was really like an early days internet tech publication. In that like the relationship between the tech press and the technology sector became so snarky and bitchy around 2012 2013 because I mean you had the rise of social media and then and then Tesla and then all these kind of big billionaires that if you were like someone like The Verge or Gizmodo, like that is who you were punching up to. Like you couldn't really punch down to all the tech startups, but you could punch up to like Facebook and all that kind of stuff. And then, so when the next web was doing its crypto stuff, that was kind of the ethos was like, well, we give shit to Meta. Why can't we give shit to Coinbase? And, which, all of that is totally warranted in its own way, but like, that in itself represents the disconnect between mainstream media and crypto too. In that, it's crypto is so not trusting of the tech press like The Verge to cover it appropriately. So it kind of looks to crypto media to do that. I feel.
I mean, I think that there's been, and I wanted to touch on this. There's a complete disconnect, I think, from mainstream media and everything at the moment, except for the whims of like the billionaire class or the people who like run the countries and organizations and things like that. Like I was watching this chart today, or I saw this chart on Twitter about like it's a straight arrow down, like the trust of people across age groups in the mainstream media. And I just thought to myself, like, that's because there's a clear disconnect from what they're reporting on, from what the audience wants to listen to, from what there actually is. So it's no surprise that when it comes to crypto, because like in crypto, we have an inherent sort of skepticism or an inherent like reticence to anything from the mainstream, even though it's weird because we're like constantly trying to like get into the mainstream or just like break through. It's like, but we hate it and we don't want to have anything to do with it and we don't believe in it at all.
Yeah, I mean, so it's really up to tech media brands to fill that gap. And it's really difficult. Like, I don't just want to sound off and preach, of what I think crypto media should look like. Like I'm
Preach
not
away,
really,
brother. Preach away.
I mean, I've done all that kind of stuff long enough that kind of I don't get a kick out of it anymore. Like, I mean, and what I can say from like my experience, like going from Protos and then coming over to Blockworks, and I am. I'm such a contrarian, like to my core, that I get a kick out of like undercutting people's expectations about stuff, if that makes sense. So it's like, you know, it's yeah, I don't really know, I don't really know what to say, but it's like, going from Protos and then into Blockworks, like personally, like it has been going from an adversarial take, almost all the time to trying to understand where all of this is going
Mm.
and not shitting on it. Uh, because,
You found your words.
I mean, because I mean, it's true. Like even the most skeptical people of crypto, they have to agree that we don't know where any of this is going. So to then say, well, because these projects have done wrong, and they're kind of there's weird tokenomics, or the insiders are dumping, and all of that stuff, like it's difficult to see where that goes from a meta perspective, and it could be the case that certain projects doing things that aren't the best, that isn't really representative of the whole.
Mm.
It's hard.
So how have you been able to like marry the two? Because it must be, yeah, it must be super strange because Protos, I'm a huge fan and I love the work that you created or that you helped create and the work that they continue to do because, and I think that we need more of that sort of outlet to sort of bring it down because we're a very like rah industry. I mean, and I say this working for like an explicitly pro crypto media outlet. Like the Defiant has a pro crypto bent, and it's been an experience in and of itself to be working in something that's like so explicitly pro the industry that it has to cover. That it also makes me wonder, and it's also like that's one of the reasons why this podcast also started because I wanted to talk to other journalists in the space to see how they marry these like seemingly contradictory positions of like, all right, I report on the industry, but then at the same time I have to like try and uncover what's happening in the industry from an unbiased perspective or from as neutral a perspective as possible. But then at the same time I'm working for a pro crypto outlet. So yeah, would you say then that you're closer to the crypto industry now, like you believe in it more than you did before you got in? Or maybe you've gone even completely the other direction and now you're even more of a skeptic.
Yeah, I mean, so a real crypto degen would say that you can only you can only understand crypto if you're like heavily invested in it. I am not currently invested in crypto right now, but that is for different reasons. Like I have a young family, and I'm getting our finances in order. Let's say that. But that is totally separate from believing in crypto, or like even understanding what it is. Like there are so many parts of the internet like itself that are terrible. But you can still believe in the internet, and the power of it to kind of do good for the world. um like whether I'm a believer in crypto, like it really depends on your definition of crypto. And a lot of like what I've been writing about lately is like coming to terms with the fact that crypto purism, like it's not totally tenable anymore, and actually it doesn't seem all that important to the space in general, like being a decentralization maxi or whatever. I still do believe in the power of permissionless networks and financial sovereignty. I think those things are it's unstoppable at this point, I would say. Like, but scaling this conversation back, like, the role of journalists, I feel in general, like not just in the crypto space, is telling it like it is. And and that obviously like it flies in the face of pure neutrality when it comes to reporting. I feel like neutrality, like the goal of neutrality in online journalism, I don't think it exists anymore. I think it's dead. I
Did
think
it ever exist though?
yeah, I mean at least like there was a target for that for a long time. I don't think it's realistic. I think the audience has moved on from that these days, because I think that the audience itself is somewhat savvy enough to find what the neutrality is in on their own. It's like they come to the media to get a perspective that they didn't realize was the case before. Um, so it's like that's pretty much what I try and do, is like try and tell it how I see it. And then so how do you do that? One of the ways is to write like hot take op-eds and kind of really kind of trigger the audience into clicking. That can work, and it can be very, it's a nice outlet for you, but it's not totally convincing a lot of the times. So the other end of it is then what I try and do, a lot of data driven journalism. So I try and look at some hard data to back up how I am seeing it, to see if that is really the case, and then try and convey all that information to the reader in a kind of succinct way. There's a lot of like a room to operate within those bounds, because you can have a take and then you can have proof of that take with some data, and then all of a sudden that becomes analysis, and then that is really like a compelling argument for considering things in a different light to what you already come into it. I find there's a lot of power in that.
Do you like articles, for example, where I suppose you do because you write op-eds or opinion pieces, but like what do you think about like journalists stating their opinion or like nudging a reader along when they're telling a story? Because like you say, you can have the data and then obviously a journalist is going to have their own take. Like I think the idea of like a neutral or an unbiased journalist is like it's idyllic. It's utopian. It doesn't exist. But like you still can skew the story in a way that sort of keeps that as much under wraps as possible. But then, and I think about this a lot. I think there's also a shift from readers looking for journalists or people that have opinions that they find interesting or connected to their worldviews or their perspective. And I think that's going to rise even more. Like I think of, I don't know, I really like to read Caitlin Johnston or Johnstone. I don't know how to pronounce her surname, but I really like her takes, and I read her because of her takes. Like her reporting is really interesting, but also her takes. But I've chatted to a bunch of people and a bunch of friends who are like, nah, I just want the straight news. And then if you want some like analysis, it's got to be from somebody that isn't the journalist.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I would almost sympathize with the latter take there. So what I've found is that over time, like I mean, I've written for a lot of different audiences now, for a lot of different outlets, and you know the danger with writing for one audience for a long period of time is that you end up writing for yourself rather than for the audience. And when you start writing for yourself, like you can really like drink your own Kool-Aid a lot. And and that can take many forms. That can be like, well, I am tough but fair, so like any wrongdoing in the space I'm going to call out, and like that's totally worthwhile. It can also take the form of, well, I'm going to give both sides of this issue, and you end up with a very, milk toast take on something that doesn't really say anything in the end. So both those things are quite dangerous, I think, because you you you're just going to become stale as a reporter, and the audience is kind of get over it. You know, and at the same time, you don't want to pander to the audience either. Uh, what I would say is the biggest thing is, again, going back to like undercut expectations. If you know that your audience is coming into this with preconceived notions about something, that it was really bad that the protocol got hacked, or the insiders, offloaded tokens when they shouldn't. If you come into that going, well, that is definitely bad for the space, then you're not really doing anything. Like, you're just telling people what they already know. I find like really interesting and dynamic writing comes from a place of, you might think this, and that's okay, but by the end of this, you're going to see that maybe things aren't as what they appeared, and actually it could turn out differently than what you first envisioned it to be. Um, that's really difficult to do, but it keeps the audience guessing. In a way that I think is really conducive to like actually people being excited about reading the next thing that you do. If the outcome is always negative, then it's going to get very tiring. Um, and it's a very neat way of coming around to, well, we do write for pro crypto brands. I like idealism in me would say that I am pro crypto too, but if if you can really kind of flip the script on how people are anticipating what you're going to write next, then I think that's where power comes in journalism at the moment.
Walk, walk us through becoming a prolific writer. Or, I mean, that might be a hard question, but like the writing process, because this is something, I'm a writer. I used to be a writer before that. Like, I used to write a lot before I got like formally into journalism. I love to write. And I think one of the things people struggle with the most is the writing process, whether that's sitting down, whether that's finding ideas, whether that's structuring your headline and then leading, all that sort of stuff. Yeah, walk us through the David Canellis writer's process. You don't have to give up any of your top government secrets, but
Yeah, I mean, so I like when I started. I think it's most reporters' experience in crypto meters. When you start, you get assigned to write maybe 2 or 3 articles per day, and it is about hitting that tempo. That was very formative for me in the beginning. I mean, even before that, when I was writing 8 pence per word, like I was doing math on how many articles I had to write per day in order to feed myself, or quit my day job was really the thing. It's like, how do I make this my full-time thing? Um, but in terms of like really like effective writing, I mean, I'm privileged at the moment in that the workflow at Blockworks for the Empire newsletter, which everyone should go and subscribe to, by the way, is the newsletter goes out at 8:45, like before 9 a.m. ET every day. I'm based in Europe, so I get like a 6 hour lead into that. So actually, like, I front load my day a lot. I actually start at 8 a.m. And so that I can have extra time to figure out what's going on. An important part of that is like, you know, this is very different to news writing. I just want to say, like, if you are reactive, like pulling, breaking news, you've got to pump it out in 20 minutes no matter what. So that's kind of the motivating factor, is that, you have a strict deadline. In terms of like newsletter writing and what I'm doing now, like, we will know the topic of what we're covering the next day most of the time, and then like I will spend probably 2 or 3 hours looking at different data points, to understand what's the meat and potatoes of the topic that we're talking about. If it's stable coins, like I want to know what chains are growing the most, where the flows are going. If it's like token growth or prices, I want to know what the market is doing right now. I spend a long time looking at that, and actually I really only give myself 60 or 90 minutes to actually write the thing. So out of 6 hours or 5 hours leading time, writing is only an hour, and I spend most of that time understanding and thinking about the topic at hand. Um, that's kind of the thing. Another thing, I mean, I don't know how common this is too, but I don't really read other people's writing. I feel like it gets in the way of how I think about things. There is like caveats to that, like big major stories that I know are a big deal. I'll read those obviously, but I don't really want to know how other people think about this stuff, if I am really trying to give an organic take. Because otherwise, the contrarian in me is going to go, oh, you took the positive angle, I'm going to take the negative angle. And I don't want any of that. I just want it to come from me, and then, you know, troll the audience into thinking they're going to get something and actually they're going to get another is kind of how I look at it.
And then when you write, do you like write it down, sort of sit back, go for a walk, go to the gym, do something, have a nap, I don't know, and then come back to it, take a second look? Or do you sort of, all right, this is ready, or to send it off to another editor or somebody for proofreading or something like that, and then off to the presses?
I mean, for the newsletter itself, like it's normally the case that like I am filing it when it needs to be filed, and there's no more room to work on this. So there's a sense of finality there because there's a strict deadline every day that the newsletter has to go out. For an op-ed, like I'm lucky to have a fantastic op-ed editor in Molly Jane. She's been a guest on this podcast before. She's fantastic in that she will make the hot takes even hotter in a way that I didn't think was feasible in the beginning. And in that case, like absolutely, like the more I've found that the more you care about something, the more that you have a real strong opinion about something, the more you need that second editor. In that you will just ship it and you'll be like, yeah, this is just what I have. Like, please, like let me know what you think, and then that is critical in terms of like the data driven journalism stuff. I think it's much easier to not have to do that walking away and then thinking about it. But either way, there is definitely an hour period in the day where I have to step away from the keyboard, make a coffee, do something else, and then like, am I really kind of getting to the heart of what this thing is? It is really important to take that time.
How did you learn to write? Or actually, yeah, how did you get into this? Is a question that I get asked a lot, like how I got into writing, because like writing is a skill, obviously, and writing well is an even broader skill, or even like more honed in skill. And I think that a lot of people think they can write and they want to write, but they're entirely unsure how to get into writing. Uh, do you have any practical tips that I can write down for myself? And obviously the hundreds of thousands of listeners that are tuning in right now want to become writers.
Yeah. I was I've done I don't want to put it all on an arts degree, but like the most I've ever written outside of a journalism context was when I was an arts degree doing a literature degree. I originally, like when I was an idealistic 20-year-old, like I wanted to be a novel writer. I wanted to be the next Charles Bukowski. Like I would write poetry and all that kind of like poetry is a great way to do it. I mean, this is probably one of the most pretentious things I'll ever say on camera, but I mean,
we're gonna zoom in right now.
I mean, like, poetry is like a great thing in that, you are trying to capture an emotion or a feeling uh, in probably a very succinct way. And you should give yourself an hour max to write that poem, and then just, well, that was the poem. This becomes a really good exercise. Yeah, I mean, again, like I just don't like reading many people because I find it gets in the way. But I found like in the early days of like really like I'm gonna be a writer, it was reading, it wasn't reading a broad range of authors. It was reading people who really spoke to me and then kind of breaking down why they are so effective. Someone like Bukowski was always very direct, really short sentences mixed with really detailed, beautiful uh, prose as well. And it's this balance, I think, is the big thing. And that's kind of what gives me a tempo in my writing is that really like, short sentences mixed with long sentences, paragraph length, uh, spacing on the page visually is super important as well. And mastering this tempo throughout the piece is really like, that's actually what I spend most of the time in my editing on is how it looks on the page and how it sounds.
What do you think of the battle between clarity versus cleverness when it comes to writing? Because like it's a constant sort of tug of war, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really lucky to have worked under really great editors. At T&W, I had a great editor, Mihov, who you can go back and read some of his stuff, and and yeah, I would use long fancy words or like, and he would always come back. It's like, I don't even know what this means. Like, what does this mean? And it's like, so I have dropped a lot of the like fancy writer talk, and I really want to communicate directly with, a reader who just talks normally. There is a time and place for really being a big brain in writing, but it is very rare. I've found the big brain stuff should come from your insights, not from how you phrase things. But at the same time, like, you know, I don't
Pro
know.
tip right there.
At the same time, like, it really depends on the kind of article that you're writing. Like, I've written pieces comparing, DeFi infrastructure to the Roman Empire and aqueducts and stuff like that. And
Interesting.
you really have to like craft those metaphors more than you have to come up with fancy words to describe things. That's the key part.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And it's something that I've been trying to like also tune down a little bit myself. I don't consider myself a pretentious writer, but I do like I love to read and I love to like use vocabulary as much as I can. And sometimes I do catch myself using these big words and then I like when I read back, I think to myself, that's such an unnecessary word right there. Like there's maybe one there's like two much easier things that I can say and that will keep the main idea underlying and it'll stay the same.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's a tough battle. It's a tough battle, and I find that I found actually that in the Bitcoin space, not necessarily the crypto space, but in the Bitcoin space, there is this desire among Bitcoin writers to like present themselves as like gigabrains and be like, oh, look at how well I write and this massive vocabulary that I use and sort of set themselves apart. And I think to myself, this makes no sense. I love the writing and I love the use of words, but at the end of the day, it's counterproductive from what you're actually trying to do.
Definitely, yeah. If I mean, yeah, unless you're talking about, Bitcoin citadels in the sky and like hyper Bitcoinization and stuff, then I'm all for the floaty language. But yeah, most of the time it's unnecessary, and I just don't like imagining my audience, going there and being like, wait, what does this word mean? And then like moving on to the next thing. I'd rather them be able to consume it the first go around, because otherwise they might be less hesitant to click your email next time.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. And then there's going to be a certain distance between you and the reader that's just completely unnecessary at the end of the day. And I think
Yeah, totally.
this topic segues really well into the usual questions that I end these conversations on, or that I always have for my guest. Because, like I was saying, I'm a massive reader, and I'm always intrigued by what fellow journalists and editors and people in the media space are reading. So I'd love to ask you. The two questions are: one is, what are you reading at the moment? And then, what's a book that you usually recommend to people? This can be anything you want. Like I had a time that I was recommending to everybody Writing That Works by Joel Stevenson, and I forgot the other his co-author. But I got into like this massive rabbit hole on like business writing and how to write all this sort of stuff and just like the structure of writing and this sort of, and that's why I asked you about clarity over cleverness. But yeah, those are the two questions on your
Yeah. So
table.
yeah. So at the moment, I'm reading. I don't know if I can like say that this person has a book coming out, but I'm reading a book from a big investor in the space, just about their philosophy on Bitcoin and cycles and stuff like that. Because we do a lot of covering of Bitcoin market cycles and how to time them. So I'm focusing on that to like inform myself more for future analysis. But in terms of like what I would recommend people to read, uh, I I'm going to recommend that people revisit the Discworld series. I don't know if everyone is familiar with the Discworld series. It's like a fantasy series of books by the late Terry Pratchett. basically, like it is, there's like 26 books in the series, or even more these days, because some came out posthumously. But it's this world that was in the in the knights and swords and arrows time, but over time eventually all these technologies were introduced to this universe. So a lot of it is like the population of this world coming to terms with the railway, or all these different things throughout time. Like, I feel like a lot of what we do as journalists is explaining this new technology to people while re-explaining how the world works to them. And I think that this series like really nails it. Like, you have all these technologies and infrastructure being introduced to a group of people who haven't really had them before. And then so you have all of their human responses to how that technology evolves and the impact that it has. And also all of these like snafus and like scandals along the way. I think it's a great metaphor for what we do in crypto media, because yeah, I mean, again, we don't. It's hard to say where all of these individual projects will end up at the end of the day, but it's clear that the technology itself is going to influence the world in kind of untold ways. So I would say people go back and read that. It's very funny too, which I think in general, I don't want to like broadly generalize what crypto media does, but humor. It would be good if stuff was funnier, in my mind. It's
That's
also serious.
Yeah, that's so funny because I was chatting to Aaron Stanley on our we had a crossover podcast a few weeks ago, and we were talking about what we'd like to see more in crypto, both media, podcasts, and I said that exact same thing. I said we need more humor, both in the podcast, both in the writing, just the general conversations we're having, like there's such a degree of seriousness that's just so annoying and so frustrating because it's like we were built on the idea of being irreverent and not giving a fuck about anything, and now we're just like veering off in this like a quest for becoming mainstream. We think we have to be more serious and more professional. It's like, why? Like, and I remember he was like, so you want more shit posting, but like in a talking form or something like that. Like, I mean, yeah, on one side, yeah, but then on the other, like, you can definitely infuse humor into everything we're doing, and it's so necessary.
I think that it is actually the key to properly informing people, like as it stands, because I mean, people are really hungry for information in the crypto space, but it is very saturated in terms of the media. So yeah, finding ways to be humorous, I think, is super important. It also reflects that you really understand and really mentally engage with all of these issues if you can twist it in a way that kind of is funny. It's a real challenge, and it can be very lame, obviously, but I think it's a skill, and I would encourage everyone to flex
Be
their shit
funnier.
posting arms. Yeah, definitely, definitely.
We want to, the takeaway from this is for everybody listening, be funnier.
Yeah, definitely. You'll find you'll have more fun in your day to day too.
100%.
Yeah,
And I think that's a great note to end on. So, yeah,
cool, man.
David, thanks heaps for coming on. This has been brilliant. I really appreciate the insights and the energy and everything. So, yeah, pleasure. And I'm excited to have you on in a future episode.
For sure, no problem. Thanks so much, Pedro.
Have a good one.
Yeah.